Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 186 of the Flicksation Podcast. Glad you could join us for another one here as we sort of wrap up the 2020 film season here. This will be our last episode talking about 2020 films before our Best of 2020 show, which is coming up probably late February or so. Today's episode is actually kind of a mix of some of the stuff I had left over from the 2020 season that for holidays and other issues I've had in the last month or so kind of got pushed to the back burner. So all this stuff was recorded previously, but I'm going to stuff it all into one mega-size episode for you here, as we will be talking about 4 films on this episode. We're going to start with our final full 2020 review discussion as we talk about the first film in Steve McQueen's Prime film series called Small Axe. We will, of course, be discussing the film Mangrove on tonight's show, and 3 older films here to talk about, as well as we will be talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger in everybody's favorite Total Recall. We will also be talking about KAMIKAZE 1989, and we'll also be talking about the Kubric classic Dr. Strangelove on the program tonight. These are from different shows, so I kind of spliced it together for you guys. Hope you enjoy the show tonight, and look forward to our end of the year episode somewhere around the end of February. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for your patience, and here we go. Let's talk some Mangrove. Hey, good evening, folks. Welcome to episode number 186 of the Flicksation Podcast. My name is Eric Madsen. I'm here at Flicksation Studios, P City, Wisco. What's going on over in the Boulder, Colorado area? It is the Minister joining us this evening. Minister, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Nothing except for the normal misery of the country right now, but no extra local misery to go on top of it. Just a horrible pandemic, but I'm not on fire or anything like that, so I guess I'm doing all right. Happy to be here.
Robert Gassaway, Phoenix, Arizona. Are you on fire, Robert?
No, not yet. Just on fire for cinema, you know me. I'm kind of doing a staycation house sitting across the valley in Chandler this weekend, so I've got a couple of miniature Doberman pinchers in my lap, so it's a kind of a relaxing kind of vibe, and great to be with you guys, of course.
Living on the edge there. That's like one pinch.
Yeah.
Go wrong.
At least they're miniatures. All right, yeah, contact the show, FlicksationPodcast@gmail.com. Call or text the voicemail line, 608-535-9302, or just follow us on Facebook or Twitter @Flicksation. Let's talk about our new film for this evening, which is considered part of a mini-series, but it's definitely, from what I can tell, a mini-series of basically 5 separate films here. This one from the Small Axe mini-series, made by Steve McQueen for the BBC One. It is actually being released by Amazon Prime every Friday for the next 5 Fridays. One of these films will be out. They chronicle the black experience in Great Britain, and I think the years, based on what I read, range from about 1966 to 1989. Mangrove set in 1970. So Mangrove, written and directed by Steve McQueen, starring Letitia Wright, Sean Parks, and Malachi Kirby. So this chronicles what's the neighborhood, guys, in
Notting Hill.
Notting Hill, a heavily populated by West Indies.
And Julia Roberts.
She's from there?
Yeah, I'm sure it's right around the corner. Gotta be.
I don't know. That's some shitty rom-com that I remember my mom owned with.
Yeah, I never saw it. I just saw the cover.
Oh, Notting Hill. Yeah, you're right. So.
Same neighborhood. You wouldn't know from the 2 covers. What about a pairing of that? What if we talked about Mangrove and Notting Hill?
Why not?
All right, so anyway, Mangrove, guys, the first of these, like I said, set in 1970. A group of protesters are arrested for rioting and affray are the charges. We spend a lot of this film in court, seeing how everything plays out, all based on real-life experiences. So, Robert, Mangrove, how did this first segment of the Small Axe series work for you?
It worked well. It's really good. I mean, as you would expect from Steve McQueen. I think I didn't like it quite as much as his last crime drama based in Chicago. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but I think that one
Widows?
was a little bit high for me.
We talking about Widows or something else?
Yeah, Widows. That was his last one I saw.
Was that Chicago?
Yeah, sure was.
Okay.
Because they had Farrell was a what do you call those guys? The aldermans in Chicago.
Oh,
really
yeah, right, for sure. Yep.
So this one, is getting into that same kind of social strata for this very specific neighborhood. I remember McQueen talking about this maybe before Widows, this project, and I thought he was saying that like this is based on some old British TV show, like was Small Axe or some part of this like already some of these 70s, like was this already something that was some kind of property or some IP back in the 70s? I don't think like he just wrote all this originally now, but it's kind of hard. Yeah, you try to pull it up on IMDb and it's just under Small Axe. If you go on Letterboxd, you can break out one of the films separately and kind of see what you're looking at. But even like the Wikipedia is not great for finding out information. I don't know a lot about why is there a large West Indian community in this part of London? What's the lineage there? What Letitia Wright's character talks about being invited there. Was that like tongue-in-cheek invited there, or was there some? I don't know the history. I'd like to know more, but I've just watched this film today. I need to learn more and read more about the backstory on this and see more interviews with McQueen. I'm sure would shed light on a lot of that. But I saw that the lead character's name was Frank Critchlow. And that sounded familiar to me. I'm like, where have I heard about this guy's story before? I know this is based in true story. I don't think it's a total true story, but it's, adapted for the screen, of course. But yeah, after watching it, I don't know where I know Frank Critchlow from. I just recognize the name for some reason. I think he's really well played by Sean Parks. I don't think I know this actor before. He's playing as a restaurant owner. That's where the name of the film comes from, Mangrove Restaurant. He's not a criminal or a he's not a mobilizer of a protest movement. We see that he comes to be a reluctant sort of civic leader. But his two sort of partners that are less reluctant are played by Letitia Wright and Malachi Kirby. So Letitia Wright is once again like Black Panther affiliated here, playing Althea Jones Althea Jones. She's really good. Gives some great speeches. So does Malachi Kirby. He's playing Darkest Howe. He's really good, but then he has this closing argument because this becomes a courtroom drama in the second half, or maybe even earlier than the second half. But he has a great monologue towards the end. And so the arc of the film is this Mangrove restaurant. We join in on the opening night of this new restaurant, and it seems joyous and at first, but it quickly becomes imperiled by horrifically racist cops. And this restaurant, we learn, is kind of this liminal space. It's this kind of, I don't know if it's like there's this community that doesn't have a lot of places like it, or if it's like a food desert, as you might call it, or a kind of a watering hole that people kind of just flock to in this area. But it's the owners used to have a place called the Rio, and so this liminal space is kind of shifting between these two locales, and they're trying to move on, or this place, this unplaceable place, is trying to move on from its past, from being like a nightlife spot with maybe some less lawful behavior, I guess, that the cops knew about. Now he's opened up a new spot, the Mangrove, but it's a restaurant, not a nightlife spot, but it's a vibrant community. People come there and hang out, but they're drinking tea and, I don't know, maybe playing cards at the most. But the cops are just on it like hawks from the first moment. And so it's this, I don't even have the name of the actor that's playing it, but we get this like super evil, obsessed cop early in the film. Like, it's a smash cut to this opening night at the restaurant, smash cut to a close up on a cop's head. You just see the 2 stars on his shoulder, on the lapel of his jacket, I guess. And you just know he's looking at the restaurant and he's pissed off. And he starts talking, spouting some racist bullshit to his partners. And we can tell, okay, this guy's like maybe up to 30 yards away from, he's not squinting, he's just casually watching, but he's obsessed with this small business. And it's owned by Black entrepreneurs in this neighborhood. It doesn't have any white patrons. And he's talking about people don't know their place. And so from there, that character is kind of one note the whole time. Like beyond that, like this character even like loves racism. He gets off on it. There's several shots of like him enjoying. He's really less of a character and more of a sin. Like, this character is so evil, he's just a sin as writ large. And so he just represents like pure institutionalized racist power. And so the film feels like the protagonists feel, which is like fighting against a brick wall, because, for the purpose of a movie, you focus on one character, 3 on the protagonist side, and then one evil guy on the bad side. But he's representing the whole industrialized force, I suppose. And so I was wondering, was that level of gross abuse of power carried over from the original TV series, if there was one, or if I'm mistaken, or is that an adaptation by McQueen? And so I'm wondering if I might have, because I like this movie, if you can't tell, but I didn't love it. I'm wondering if I might have even more appreciation for it once I see the whole series play out on Amazon. And they're all kind of, I wonder if they're going in chronological order. I think this one's 1968, and I wonder, I'm not expecting them to be connected, but maybe in theme about this, like, everyday activities being shrouded over by the powers that be, and the weight of racism and hatred and xenophobia. What I'm also curious about in this series, well, maybe because of this, the way it starts off here, is it's way more musical than I was expecting. This film is very musical. Like, there's dancing in the streets. There's several, like, I don't know if you say they're numbers, but there's a lot of singing together, people singing together. The soundtrack is emphasized in this film, and it's an excellent soundtrack, great reggae songs. But I guess I should have suspected some musicality, given, I thought it was just like a protest movie, protest movement, true story, and a little bit of courtroom stuff. But there's more courtroom than I thought, which is fine. Courtrooms are good for drama, but we'll get to that. But it has a lot of musicality. But the second film in the series is called Lovers Rock. So maybe I should have expected this is going to go kind of musical. And it's part of the series called Small Axe, which is the name of a Bob Marley song that we know. So that's another musical reference, I think. I also I like when people refer to their guitar as their axe. Eric, you're a guitar player. Do you ever refer to any of your electric guitars as like, oh, I just got to tune up my axe, or I just bought a new axe, check it out?
I've used the term a few times.
Yeah, there you go. So there's some musicality going on with the themes in this series, I think. But it is a protest film. When it gets to be a protest scene, I think that's amazing. One of the best scenes. It starts peacefully enough. There's some chants about saying hands off black people. But the cops, of course, show up to escalate it, and it becomes a scene of excessive force and racial brutality. The way that scene is shot is just another high point. I love the way this film looks. It's like really high definition and clear, but it's a period piece in 2020, looking back in 1968. It's got this really convincingly immersive period and place in time. It's like high definition, and it's got this super smooth camera movement. A lot of shots either start or end with this gliding to and from the characters, which kind of is out of step with a 60s set film, but it's still immersive and puts, like, I felt like I was there. Like I never felt like I never was pulled out that this is a film. I was really in this neighborhood, in this time, this place and time. And I keep noticing it with McQueen's films. And again, here is the colors he uses in his films. Like you know how they do like color timing on films, and like the color temperature of his films. I don't really notice them in films a lot. Like I love visuals and cinematography and colors in films, but like the color timing, the color temperatures in McQueen's film are like more pronounced. I've noticed him play around in this area before, and he just has really good like color palettes for his films. But you notice it the way he shoots skin tones and faces and period wardrobes and his landscapes. I mean, look at 12 Years a Slave, and they just look different than most other films. Even Widows. He could do a lot. He has a lot of range with his visuals, and you can tell that he really loves working, with that sort of film language. And then I noticed the sections of this film. I don't know if if it's a 3-act film, it might be more than that because the courtroom drama has a couple different acts to it. But the sections of this film are separated by inserting archival photographs of either protest organizers or brutal headlines from police brutality and news clips and stuff like that. Kind of like Spike Lee did with Black Klansman, kind of intercut archival footage to break up sections. And so it does kind of eventually shift to becoming a courtroom drama. It's interesting that they kind of all go on trial together instead of separately like you would in the United States. And some of the group is self-represented. They're their own lawyer, and some of them are not. So there's some kind of infighting that causes. So I didn't think it was like the most compelling trial that we see. I can tell you, I can see it's a landmark trial and probably made a lot of policy changes in the UK, but not the most compelling trial. But I thought it was satisfying to see the dumb racist lords get caught lying, I guess. So it was like a satisfying trial, but not like super compelling the way it was told here. But me as the audience, I think you guys probably felt that you can at least share the protagonist's frustration with the oppressive and unjust system. So like that's effective for a courtroom drama. You like can't believe what the defense is trying to pull. It's just absurd. But it's movie drama. But what really saves this film, not saves it. I mean, McQueen can't make bad films, I don't think. He's just not doing it. He's not up to that. But the trio of performances from from Letitia Wright and Malachi Kirby and Sean Parks, who may have the least amount of lines, but just his facial expressions and the way he breaks down towards the end, really convincing character work. Yeah, so I'm wondering if, I guess some of them do pop up in the later films, and maybe I'll have more increased appreciation for what they're doing across this series. But this is a great way to start out. And then one last thing I'll mention is the kind of subversive satire here. We just talked about a politically subversive film with Strangelove. I think the subtle satire or parody here was just putting those dumb powdered costume wigs that the British people wear in court. The way that the young lawyer wears it is satire to me. Just how goofy it looks. Yeah. This old ass 100-year-old wig on this like 25-year-old lawyer is really funny to me.
Yeah, and since you bring that up, that's one thing I kind of really appreciate about this look into this is, and I don't know if you get this same thing with like a white director or maybe even some other black directors, but a more traditional telling of this might make more of a hero out of that young white lawyer who's
That's true. Totally.
Yeah, he comes up with sort of their legal strategy and kind of helps steer them, like in the second act of the film, and then he's just kind of there the rest of the film. So I'm glad that's where McQueen went with that instead of making him look like more of a hero. I thought that courtroom stuff was all really well done.
I don't even think I knew this existed 3 weeks ago. So the idea of a really light year where tons of movies are getting pushed back or they're being released in theaters that none of us are, for the most part, going to. It's pretty exciting that Steve McQueen's dropping more movies in a month than he's released in his entire career to that point. I think he's got 4, right. And now he's got 9. So this is going to help the list making possibility. So that's really exciting. And I don't know how often I've thought about it, but very few British films from black directors that I've seen in my life about Britain. Like 1, 2, 3. I don't know. I can't name many. A couple, 5. I'm not sure. So this is something that and they
Green
may
Street
exist.
Hooligans, man.
That's not black in any way. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
you just said I missed the black part.
Yeah, black directors, like black stories in Britain from black directors. It's so rare. I've seen a couple, but I mean, the population, it's a much smaller percentage there than here, so that's part of it. But it's exciting. We're going to watch 5. And McQueen, I think, is really great, even if I don't think everything he's done is great. I like pretty much all of it. But so, yeah, I mean, wow, pretty relevant, huh? This movie? I mean, it's I mean, this is always relevant, of course, but it feels in this country right now, in this world, as relevant as ever, but to it, not even in a broad way, like in a very, very specific way. Like lawful, quote, quote unquote, lawful police terrorism of neighborhoods and communities, mostly of color, as a way to scare into inaction and submission. It's the criminalization of protest with really absurd, hefty fines and penalties and prison time possibilities. Again, trying to scare into inaction and submission. This is what's happening in every single big city in this country right now, like weekly. This is, in Denver, marches go on at 2 in the afternoon against police murder of a black kid, and then at 2 a.m. that night somebody breaks a window on a courthouse, and then 2 weeks later everyone who organized the march 8 hours earlier get raided by the FBI and they get charges where they could go to prison for 20 years. I mean, and this is happening pretty consistently here, and it's this exact situation. So this movie, what these people did, the Mangrove 9 didn't solve. Everything's not solved, of course, but activists and righteous citizens have so much strategic history, like this trial, like these people, that they can help, like they can use, they can study, that they can guide the resistance now. I mean, it's important that the first people, I mean, other people did other things all over the world and you can learn from, but within this film, this seems like a first step for this movement in this community or maybe in that country. I mean, the fact that the trial was where it was and it was such a big deal, it seemed like a first, or at least that's the way it's presented. So a first is really important so that people now can study that and strategize around that. So yeah, it's just so damn relevant. And I'm really glad to learn this story, but it just feels like, it just feels so now and always and dispiriting in that way, I guess. But yeah, the fight's never won. But I don't know. These people knew they were starting something. That was clear. At least a couple of them. Some of them were unwilling or like the main character, like Robert said, he didn't. I don't even know if he's the main guy, but the guy who owns the Mangrove, like that's not what he sets out to do. He gets swept up in it, but he's very important, a very important figure in this. A couple of them, yeah, one's a part of the Black Panther Party. She knows what she's getting into. It's a fight, an important one. And within this film, a lot of them are, it seems like, or maybe all have roots in Trinidad. And it around this time, or I guess a few years before, they had some form of a revolution. And again, I don't know this history well, so I should, like Robert, it would be nice to look into this stuff. But I know Trinidad and Jamaica and stuff gained some form of their official independence in 1962. And then more protest and Black Power activism was going on. So these characters are inspired by what's going on where they came from, or at least before England. Yeah, I dug McQueen's presentation here. I think it's clear that the director is a part of this type of community, or at least a Black director in the way he presents it. He presents like a very, and Robert touched on this, a very vibrant, beautiful community. This, there's stark brutal reality of the racist harassment. Absolutely, it's brutal and it's constant and it continues and it keeps happening to not comical, but to an insane degree, just over and over, these raids and harassment. There's a very intimate depiction of the intense anger and anguish this causes some of our characters, the fear for their businesses, for their communities, for their unborn children. That Sean Parks guy character, more than any, just really anguished over this. But there's a proud resiliency. What I like is it always retains that vibrancy of the community. And I think I give the director, McQueen specifically, credit for that. I just think they continue to live and celebrate. They fight, they recover, of course. They fight, horrible things are happening. But there's an insistence that the community continues to thrive. The dancing, the music, they get raided, and then a week later, they're still having their parade. I like that element, and I feel like this is what they're fighting to protect. But I feel like in most movies, you'll get the good times for 20 minutes, then the horribleness for 40 minutes, and then the trial. This one keeps cutting back to they're going to continue to live. And I just thought that was really kind of rare for one of these. And then the courtroom itself, I again dug what McQueen was doing, as much for what it was as for what it wasn't. We kind of have an idea of what courtroom scenes are like because of 1,000 Law and Order episodes, and courtroom drama movies are kind of a big deal. There's a lot of really famous ones and a lot of really famous scenes. A lot of actors break out in them because they get to give these speeches. I think they're almost always, if not bad, just really, really fake, and for dramatic effect, of course. So I think of like Aaron Sorkin writes these. I know he just made one that I didn't watch about the Chicago. I forgot the number on that, but
7.
7. There we go. And he did his "You Can't Handle the Truth" movie that I also didn't watch. I don't know, A Few Good Men, I think that is. But like, courtroom scenes are very, very written. Obviously, it's all speeches, and it's very, I don't know, I find them very phony and smug, and often just very like a play. And sometimes they're entertaining for sure, but they don't feel real. They're filled with aha twists and things like that. And I think this it's not low key, but I don't like, it has loose ends to it. Like, everything's not a perfect, this isn't like the perfect script, again, like quotes, like the perfect Sorkin script or something where every word is perfect and that's what it's all about. This actually has like courtroom defendants, like, I don't know, it's imperfect in a way. Like the performances are raw and moving rather than like perfected and tight. They make mistakes, like people outburst in ways that don't really mean anything, like would happen. It just feels there's like a reality to it. And when I say the performances are raw, I don't mean in like an amateur way, but I just think it's a character choice to make it less polished, and it's more real. I mean, these people would not be polished, most of these people, and the ones that would give powerful speeches. I mean, I forgot the characters' names. What's the three main, the one that gives the long speech at the end? Like, it's a really powerful.
Dark as How.
Yeah, it's a powerful speech, but it doesn't have like the music swell. It doesn't have what a bad or even traditional courtroom one would have. And like Eric touched on, I think it's such a perfect point what you said about the white lawyer character played by this Jack Lowden character, or this Jack Lowden guy. He puts together this strategy that they're going to use to kind of disrupt this conservative judge, and it definitely happens. And you have this white lawyer, like, he's kind of like this hip young, I don't know, probably listens to Cream. He's cool. He listens to Cream, guys. But he's got like shaggy hair and stuff. But he's like riling up the judge and sniggering as he does it. And I was like, oh no, we can't go down this route. Like, this is all right.
That's like Tom Cruise in If You Couldn't Hint. I just watched that for the first time a few months ago.
But I'm just so glad that it didn't become like the defense was a sneaky strategy and a gimmick, and that's how it plays out. Like, that fades. It's a part of it, but it's not like this perfect, we have this perfect idea and we're going to trick them and they're going to be revealed as racist and everything's great. There's bits of that, but there's more to it. It's not a gimmick. Their defense isn't a gimmick. It's a comprehensive, emotional, and righteous plea. And they push every button they have to, but there's more to it than that. And they're not like pulling the wool over people's eyes type of thing. So I like that. And they're exposing the obvious stuff, the systemic racism. But of course, like the most important thing they show is it's dismissing the idea that authority deserve unquestioning respect and trust. Once they get jurors, and in this case, it seems like it was being widely reported and culturally important, there's many people that just never question, like the idea that police and those in power are not infallible is a really major hurdle, because once you understand that, you question everything and you can look at things like in a real way. So I think it does a really good job, even if it's not edge of your seat stuff in the courtroom. There's quirks to it. There's funny bits. There's emotional stuff. There's almost sloppy stuff that I thought felt real. And then on top of all that, I just think that guy, Sean Parks, the guy who owns the Mangrove,
Frank,
that actor, Frank, there we go. He was given such a great role. Like, this is an Oscar role. The guy got to do like everything emotionally. Yeah, he's like the reluctant face of this thing, but he gets to show the charisma when he's running the place, the anguish, the defiance, the fear, the doubt. Really, the most powerful stuff when he's attempting to hold in this exploding indignance as he's being mistreated. That guy, I mean, it's a role that a really good actor is going to nail. And this guy's clearly a really good actor because he nails that. And then on top of it, great soundtrack. So I like this a lot.
Kind of reminded me of the Barry Jenkins film that came out 2 years ago. Beale Street Could Talk. Yeah, because also the way it treats the cop, like he's just like clearly super racist cop from the beginning, and it's like that's a movie trope, but it's an effective way to kind of get the emotion across that maybe a black person would feel in that experience about how they just cannot win, and it's just absurdly stacked against them, and this person is just not going to see reason. If I try to make a rational argument with them, I have to catch them in a lie. I think I misspoke earlier saying it was satisfying to see the defense caught in a lie, but I mean the plaintiffs, that's obviously the cops getting caught in the lie when they're trying to put these false accusations. There's not many courtroom films where the whole trial is a sham. It's like baseless. I think maybe A Time to Kill is kind of a bogus trial. But yeah, like you're saying, I agree with everything Ian said about the cliches and the one-liners. Like, yeah, Time to Kill, you just know Sam Jackson saying, "You're damn right, and I hope you burn in hell." There's just, and of course, To Kill a Mockingbird has the quotable lines. But yeah, this one it does have enough quirks where you're like, oh yeah, that's different. That's not the same as all other courtroom dramas. So it's easy to see why McQueen was drawn to the material. Unless I'm mistaken, and he wrote all this originally, then it's even better than I thought.
There is that scene right near the end. It's about 20 minutes from the end or whatever, that Frank is kind of wrestling with what he's going to do going forward in the trial, and his attorney is suggesting things, and Frank has this kind of big emotional scene with the female lead here. If I've seen an Oscar scene this year, that's the one. So I agree with everything here. I really like this film. I love the court stuff works for me. Court TV, court movies. I'm kind of a sucker for these kind of things anyway, unless they're completely ridiculous. The way this is portrayed in a different way, and I'm always kind of fascinated with law in other countries that I'm not familiar with, because I've seen, like you said, 1,000 at least episodes of Law and Order and other things, Perry Mason, all that crap. So I'm always kind of fascinated by foreign courts, although British courts aren't too much different other than the goofy clothes and stuff. But so I'm a big fan of this. I want to hang out at the Mangrove. I want to sit there smoking cigarettes and doing whatever they're doing. I don't think the food's going to agree with me too much. All
Right,
that spicy stuff, but
like the Mangrove kept getting harassed by cops for like 18 more years after the trial, and so I'm like, what does this place need to like stop this? Oh, it needs white patrons. If like there was white people sitting in there, then I think the cops would not rush in, which is a horrible thing to say.
There's that one white girl there.
Oh,
at least, but yeah, the one that
with the big
Frank's
afro,
dating or something. No, Frank's with that white girl near the end. She's in the few scenes in the Mangrove.
Oh.
When he's coming, this
That's
night
right.
where he's deciding what's going on and stuff. But not a whole lot.
And so maybe I'm just thinking of like, you're with these three humans fighting against this inhuman force of this, just like, it's like a monolith of racism. It's like just a cold, like monolithic slab of racism that you're like, there's no way that they're right. There's no way you can get on board with it. So you're just watching like these three humans who have like, their story has like your heartstrings, and there's nothing, there's just a wall to bounce it off of. But that's the more of the theme. It's not humans versus a machine. I mean, it is that, but it's also just like humanity versus inhumanity, and the coldness and versus like warmth, and really hot versus cold. I mean, just break it down more elemental than that. And I like the clarity, or like the way that McQueen's kind of just showing like, yeah, these people are just doing everyday things in their lives, and this much drama, this much turmoil, this much pain and suffering comes out of just being who they are, happen to be in this place where people don't like them being who they are, where they are, in the time that they are. That's awful. And there's another way to make people more aware of it, and hopefully change it by making stories like this.
Yeah, and I didn't draw to the Beale Street film in particular, but yeah, all the Mangrove stuff had a very, at least French Quarter feel to it for me. Everybody dancing in the street to the steel drum, and that scene when they got the grill out front and they're all just having a good time and stuff. Yeah, which is funny because it's sandwiched between two really horrible, like much more negative sequences. So the structure is kind of weird, and maybe that's the TV thing. I don't know, but yeah, good film.
The repetition of those raids just beats you down as a viewer. It's like, I can't fucking watch another one of these. But that's the point. I think 3 years, I don't know how many years ago, 5 years ago, this same character, the white cop character, might play different. I just think, post, and it's all about how aware you are. The stuff's there anyway, but post the president of the United States, who will not be named, the overtness of people who support him in their racism has changed things. Political satire isn't satire anymore because of how much the realities become, satire. You can't satirize that asshole. You can't make a police officer that's more like cartoonishly evil than what we're dealing with. It's really true. If you go downtown in Denver right now, today, if you had went downtown, or any Saturday, there will be hundreds of white people shouting gay slurs and racist slurs at people all day long while being surrounded by 100 police in riot gear every single weekend. It happens every single time. The police are there with them. Police are talking to them. This is 50 years ago, this story is taking place. My experience with police is if you get through the police academy, you will get hired no matter what. You might not work in Denver. You can work in a town of 2,000 people somewhere else, no matter how racist or terrible you are. Once you've paid for the academy, they will hire you because it saves them $40,000. If you have a certification, you will be hired no matter how terrible you are. So these people exist right now, 50 years after this, and they're all over the fucking place. So it's not too extreme. It seems on the nose. Like you can't, like that's a Spike Lee thing. It's like his shit is so on the nose, but it works. But because it's Spike Lee.
In that last movie, because that was the big drawback on that one. I was just like, oh, it's too cartoonish with this.
It's how it. But I always
how it feels too. Like, wow, this the whole system against me.
But he gets away with it because he's Spike Lee. But now I think anyone can get away with it because it's so apparently true. It doesn't always make the movie better or worse. Like, it was a minor complaint in a much, much worse movie, Detroit, from 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
essentially. But it's so apparent, at least in my experience now, and so vile. And the other thing I'll say is, it's not the image of the movie, but I just found it like very, not even poignant, but it hit me in a way. There's an image in this film that shows exactly what a police officer, like the mindset or I don't know, how a police officer operates more than maybe anything I've seen in any movie ever. And it's a simple thing. It's when they're pulling up to the court at the Old Bailey, there's an overhead shot of 2 police cars pulling into the court, and there's parking spaces, like 4 of them, and they pull both at an angle.
Yeah, that's
in
perfect.
about 4, there's like 4 spots. They take up all 4, and they're at an angle like 10 feet over the line, and then they just jump out. And it's the idea that obviously you're outside the law to at least a degree where you kind of feel like you can cut every corner in some way, and it really translates to their entire life. It's why there's more like domestic abuse husbands in police than in the normal population. It's like there's a certain level of law that doesn't apply to you, and it's just kind of ingrained in you at a certain point. And that was a wonderful image. That was very specific, in the same way the image with the powdered wigs and then the defendants wearing the black caps was very, like where they said, take off those ridiculous hats, as some dumbass is wearing a powdered wig from 200 years ago. Like, there's a couple of really like clever images that I think say a lot. So
did it? I think I missed a cut right there. Like, was it he was one guy that was wearing the cap and he said take it off and then he sits down? Did it do it like a jump cut to the next day and they're all wearing the same hat, or they were already all wearing the same hat?
That was the same. No, that was he sat down. To them all wearing the same hat.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's a funny little scene that shows the absurdity of a bunch of old guys in white wigs are gonna try to judge this. Yeah, it's a nice image. It's a funny moment, but yeah, it's good. I think one of these movies is like 40 minutes long, so who knows what we're gonna get out of these things.
Yeah, and I looked, Robert, since you kind of alluded to it. IMDb lists 136 actors in this series, and lists them all as being in one episode. So I don't know if there's no crossover. I mean, TV shows, but these are narrative TV shows, will do that so it doesn't give away somebody dying or something in an episode. So as they come out, sometimes it'll just say 1 episode, 2 episodes, 3 episodes. I doubt that's what's going on here. He's probably just uses all different people, but
it's great because think of how many actors could pop from this and start showing up and stuff that we've never seen. Because I really don't know if I've seen almost any of those people other than the white guy. I kind of thought Eric would be into the lawyer who the big fat pig lawyer.
Oh yeah, he was good.
I don't even know.
And the other scene, I mean, it's not kind of symbolic like the police cars out the window kind of thing, and it's very much, this PC pulley guy, it's super mustache twirling villain here. But that scene where they go to the police station and he's just kind of sitting off to the side where they can't see him, and he's just kind of smirking the whole time. And they all get in a fight with the other cops, and as soon as they get him out the door, the other guy just asks how his tea is or whatever. without just complete, like nothing ever, like nothing just happened. How's your tea? Yeah, just.
Well, it's like fun to torture the animals. That's the way they're looking at it. Like it's fun to.
Yeah, right.
Pull the leg off the spider and watch them squirm.
Or when they go to pick up their son from the police station and they bring him out, and you see the level of damage inflicted to his face, and the mom just has this emotional reaction. She's hardly in the film much at all, but that's a great scene. It felt like like that was really her son, and that was really a true reaction. And like I felt that in that moment, because you can't these guys are just smirking at you, and you know that even if that guy behind the counter didn't do it directly, he authorized it. He's down with that program. They do it all the time. It's just like makes your stomach turn. And so that that emotional release that she gave was kind of cathartic. Like, God, there's so much like pressure going on in this little community and in this film that it has to be released in some moments. And just being able to slap a police officer, it feels good in a second, but it doesn't compare to what they just did to her son, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's like that. There's another, to me, that's another just great thing from McQueen, I guess, that you don't leave this film because it's so brutal. If you were to take out some of the joy in this, it's just unbearable. It could have been that film. It could have been just unbearable. You leave this thing just like distraught, or it could have been this big triumph, and it actually was able to be kind of both and neither, and kind of you feel good and bad and uncertain and this is unfinished. I just thought it was a really good balancing act.
Yeah, and with kind of curtails on the quote unquote unfinished thing. Yeah, and it seemed like McQueen was like, there's a few times he kind of tosses in these little details that you, at least for me, click like, oh, that's going to be important, and then it's just nothing again. So it's like,
love that.
Yeah, Frank at one of the times he's in court, he gets this look on his face like he just came up with something and says, hey, please get me a transcript of everything the judge said. So I expected that to go somewhere, and it kind of didn't. He kind of focuses on that younger cop a little bit that you can tell is like not quite down with everything, but you don't know because he kind of still does everything. He's cross-examined in court, but otherwise there's not kind of much there either. But yeah, it seems like he's leaving these scraps of things that he just, but yeah, it makes the film more interesting. So, Total Recall. This one, I remember all these Arnie films from years past. A lot of them I've seen a lot of times. For whatever reason, I hadn't seen this one more than one or two times, and it had been quite some time. So, and what's weird is I was just talking about with Christian a couple of episodes ago how, like, Waterworld seemed like it all came back to me, even though I'd only seen it one time. And there was a lot of this one. I don't know. This one didn't stay in my mind very long because a lot of this stuff this rewatch was almost, I recognized a lot of it, but I wasn't keyed in on, oh yeah, I remember all that stuff like I was with Waterworld for some reason. So that's weird. But yeah, Total Recall. So I'm just curious, Minister, you are the one that pitched this film as one of the quarantine specials at some point. So what was your draw to Total Recall here?
Yeah, I think it came around the time I was just asking what are the great blockbusters of all time, because I knew it's not always my area that I love, but growing up you see pretty much all of them, so there's like a whole era of film where I've seen them all, and then there's ones you just turn your nose up at or whatever. And I didn't realize that's how Waterworld got on our radar, and I was not on that show, but I was pretty big fan of that. So yeah, this was on Netflix. I'd never seen it, and I just knew people liked it, and not ironically, I didn't think, but I actually kind of thought it was more of like a cult sci-fi thing, and then I looked, it made like many hundreds of millions of dollars. So I just didn't really know why I hadn't seen it or where it fit or what the fuck. I knew it was Verhoeven, and I again think of him as cult, but he's not at all cult. So I don't know what to do with it. Yeah, it just was like this weird anomaly that I never even seen a second of on TV or anything.
Okay. Yeah, and for me, I definitely saw this in the theater because I was mostly a fan of Arnie movies overall, and this was pretty much right on the heels of Basic Instinct, and I was young and a big Sharon Stone fan, we'll say, at the time. So I probably would have seen just about anything she was in anyway. So yeah, definitely saw it in the theater, and I don't think I saw it more than once or twice since then. It was probably right when it came out on video. But Robert, what's your history with Total Recall 1990?
This is my third viewing. I had seen it when I was probably a teenager, caught up with it after hearing it for years that it was one of his best, and I've seen all the most popular Arnold films and enjoyed them. And then I watched it again when they did a reboot or a remake with Colin, what's his name? Colin
Farrell,
yeah, and Jessica Biel. I thought it was decent. Like it's not bad, but it just failed to be as interesting as the original. So whenever that was, like 4 or 5 years ago, that came out, I revisited this, and it kind of raised, in my estimation, I thought it was better than I remembered it being. And then so watching it today, it was kind of interesting to kind of put the pieces together that I might have missed those first two viewings. So yeah, just third time for me.
Yeah. Okay. So roughly third time for me, I guess. And I would kind of agree. I was actually not really sure what I was going to think about this because there are definitely Arnie films that I love that from earlier than this that I know aren't very good, but I just they hit me at the right time in life or whatever, and they still work for me. I wasn't huge into this film at the time, and my guess was that I hadn't really revisited it much since then for a reason. And watching it, I did have a lot of fun. I had some laughs at it. I think the story and stuff is pretty fascinating. It's based on a Philip K. Dick short story, so I don't know how much, if they draw from that pretty heavily or whatever, but I don't know the background in any of that. But I think as far as Schwarzenegger film, like storylines and plot lines and stuff go, I think this is definitely one of the more interesting ones. Schwarzenegger's villains come and go, but I really do like Michael Ironside and Michael Champion as these kind of two, hot and heavy mercenaries or whatever. And even Ronnie Cox is kind of the bad guy billionaire type in this one. Works for me. So all mustache twirling type villains as well. But the Schwarzenegger one-liners sort of hit. There's less of them in here than there are in most of his films. There's only one or two, but they're actually pretty good ones. One thing that's kind of funny about Arnie movies too is now that we're so engrossed or just entrenched with these stylistic martial arts fighting scenes and stuff, Arnie doesn't really know how to fight effectively. They just try and make it look the best they can in all his movies. And this one looks a little more wonky than I'm used to. The fight scenes just do not seem good in this. And I was actually watching this this morning on my iPad, and I had my Bose headphones on, and the sound effects for like the hitting and stuff are like Three Stooges level bad. So for such a big budget movie in 1990, I mean, yeah, that's 20 years ago now, but I don't know. It seems like it wouldn't be so badly done in that regard, but you can poke 1,000 holes into the plot and stuff here, but you just kind of go with that in Arnie films. It's still not one of my favorite of his. Could be worse. The overly gratuitous violence I don't think it even needs to be here in this film. So I'm surprised they wouldn't just notch some of the cheesy violence back to get the PG-13 rating, and probably could have done much better with this film, because it's not like there's much I mean, there's nudity, but it's kind of fake. I don't remember hearing the F word at all. So you would think they could have just scaled back that bad violence.
That's something in my notes, but I'm kind of curious about. I just think that's, well, my experience with the guy's actually not very good, and I think I'm in a pretty major minority there with Paul Verhoeven. But that's kind of his thing, right? Everything I've seen of his is so I don't know, like RoboCop's horribly violent, right?
Yeah, sure.
Basic Instinct is very hard R sexual. He's got a handful of movies. I'm just forgetting them all. I thought I'd seen
because he's got like 3 action movies: RoboCop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers. Which it's violence, but it's against alien spider things. And then he has 3 like over-sexualized relationship dramas with Elle, with Isabelle Huppert, Basic Instinct, and Showgirls. All his other stuff is like, well, he did Hollow Man, which is supposed to be bad. The rest I've never really heard of. It's like obscure movies. So the 6 he's known for are 3 in one category and 3 popcorn blockbuster action flicks, and then 3 like sexy relationship dramas. It's really a strange mix.
But at least 5 of those are pretty hard R.
Yeah.
He doesn't tone down the sexuality or the violence. It just might be something he gets off on. I like the really grotesque. It actually reminded me of another movie that it surprised me in. What was it, like 5-6 years ago? A kind of shitty movie called Elysium that I liked, but it was just really gross and violent, and it surprises you when you see just really gross hyper violence in a movie that's not like a Guy Ritchie movie or like selling itself as that. But I think like there's something in Verhoeven that I find dorky, and it's like his need to put in like the grandma telling him to fuck off or whatever. Like that's not funny. It's not funny. And like the triple boob go to that like 8 times. Like there's something like where
I wish I had
like
3 hands.
Yeah. So there's something about the guy. I'm not going into this movie. He's like 0-1 and 4 if you're gonna go with soccer scores here. He's got a tie and 4 losses coming into this one for me. So he's not my guy generally.
Well, yeah. So I don't know. It was fine. I had a good time with it, and we can dig a little further into it a bit later. But yeah, Robert, what did you think of this one? Or what do you think? You've seen it a few times.
Yeah, and the thing I think of when I think of Total Recall is the special effects. I think it is the like X-ray machine gag, but also the like everyday stuff that you see, like the tennis coach hologram or the taxi robot. We get him a couple of times, but also the set pieces with that X-ray machine or that exploding lady in TSA or whatever. The nostril bulb that he pulls out, the tracker, the faces sort of melting on Mars at the end. Those are the things that stand out. I think Verhoeven's good at effects, and I think he's good at movie stars, like 1 per movie, or maybe 2 in this case. In all his films, well, maybe not RoboCop, but he knows how to get a great central performance. And there's something about Schwarzenegger he's just a physical specimen. He's not really a good actor, but he has this magnetic screen presence and this odd charm. Here, I like that he's like an action star named Doug. They call him Quaid. He's Douglas Quaid. But just having a guy that looks like him named Doug running around is like funny action star stuff. Every time I see this movie, I've seen it twice in the last 4 or 5 years, I think, I miss this kind of movie. They don't make this anymore. And I'm thinking, okay, who would do this movie now? Clearly, I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is the analog to Schwarzenegger right now, with the charm and that just the action sort of presence he has. But why doesn't he do sci-fi? The Rock, I don't think, has made one single sci-fi movie, or if
he should have been in Bright.
There you go.
He might have been in Bright. I don't know if anybody saw it. Did you see the original casting choice of this one way back?
No.
I think the first iteration of this, Richard Dreyfuss. So there you go.
Get out of here. There's no way.
I can't Richard prove any of this. I don't know.
Schwarzenegger was supposed to do Mr. Holland's Opus.
The Roy, or I can't think of. There's another terrible one. Oh, I can't. I wish I knew Dreyfuss movies. I had a good joke there somewhere. I'm gonna look it up. You can edit it.
If they made this movie now, like if this Philip K. Dick had one to make it, would go to Tom Cruise still, who, his other novel, Minority Report, Cruise did. But now, like, this is very similar to the movies that Tom Cruise is like the only guy making this type of movie right now with Live, Die, Repeat, whatever that movie was called.
Yeah.
That's basically, borrowing from Total Recall here. It also starts off, I thought it was interesting this time I noticed, this movie starts with dream sequence, then sex scene, then conversation, let's move to Mars. That's just a great opening for any sci-fi movie. Dream sequence, sex scene, let's move to Mars. But it's more complicated than that with Sharon Stone's character, who she is, who Arnold is. And Arnold's fake persona as this construction worker that's not going anywhere on this planet, it's Chris Pratt from the Lego movie. It's this guileless construction worker that's embroiled in the industrial complex, and he becomes the chosen disruptor of it and has this underground movement helping him. That's the same as the beginning of the Lego movie. And he gets on the train to go to work, and it says things like the memory of we can give you the memory of a lifetime, and it's winking at what the storyline is here, and the idea of taking a vacation from yourself. And then we see all this brutalist architecture and this totalitarian future. I think this Cohagen guy has a lot of Trump in him, watching it now compared to when I watched it 4 years ago. And we see some extreme use of force to suppress this rebellion, and we're rooting for the rebellion immediately. And so this film meets that sort of oppression, that corporate oppression, with violence and comedy. And we get, like Eric said, some good Arnold one-liners. We don't always get that. Sometimes they're really bad, but they're good here. It's not a body horror, but this movie really is obsessed with bodies. We get bullet riddled bodies and exploding bodies, sexy bodies, or disfigured bodies, and bizarre mutilated bodies. And I think that's I don't know if it's using this trope of capitalism and this villainous corporate power trope that we see throughout sci-fi. It seems like that power, for as long as it's been in place in this world, has caused the world to deteriorate and people to be mutated, and they control memory and prosperity in this movie. And so, if you're in the rebellion, it's because you're a mutant, apparently. And then we have memory represented by Melina, who he has the actress who plays Melina is Rachel Ticotin. I guess she's been in a few movies, but she has zero chemistry with Arnold here. But Sharon Stone really does. I think this is her first big movie, and she kind of just jumps off the screen. It's easy to see that she would be a star. 2 years later, she's in Verhoeven's Basic Instinct, and sort of broke the internet before it existed. So it's interesting that I don't know why he has chemistry with one but not the other. So maybe Verhoeven's not good at getting chemistry, but he got 2 movie stars here. And I think special effects and movie stars is what he does well.
Yeah, I got to call back. I mean, the joke I was digging deep for in my brain, and I wish I was a younger, more on-the-ball guy, because I could have dropped a Schwarzenegger in Krippendorf's Tribe joke in there, but I could not. Yeah, that would have hit, you guys. That would have been funny. So I get about
definitely would have. Yeah.
25%.
It'd be called Krippendorf Cop.
There you go. You're still sharp. It's interesting. You get younger as we age. It's the sun. Anyway, I think it's interesting, and it still happens, I think, but you can probably tear this apart, and it's not accurate. But I'm watching this movie, and I'm watching the big villains, who Eric likes, and he's some of these actors in 80s movies, like character actors and stuff, are guys who you recognize, and they're just guys to me, to a degree. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. These guys are just guys to me. I don't know their names. I don't know what they're in, but I think it's interesting just how often the main bad guys of action movies were just kind of ugly guys who are just awful. They're just bad guys who are ugly.
Yeah.
And now, this movie would have Jared Leto, and he'd be blue, and he'd be hamming it up. That's kind of the way it is now. It's a huge movie star acting as, it's like a Johnny Depp or something, just going as bonkers as they can to just show off or something. And it's funny how often it was just bad businessman for so long. And I mean, it works for sure. The guys are good, and I think it is in a lot of sci-fi, as you said, Robert. But I guess looking back, I like that the bad businessman, smooth business at all costs, no matter who dies for it. That's good in a 1990, right at the tail end of the Reagan Bush eras. So it fits really nicely. Now, probably at any time, but it definitely fits in 1990. So I like that. But yeah, just ugly bad dude. Who's like the second in command guy who he won't tell him any of the information? Is that Ironside?
Michael Ironside, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that guy's great in this, but it's just that guy wouldn't be in the movie today. What this has going for it, for sure, to me, and again, on the show I wasn't on, the Super Mario Brothers, I think absolutely kills it for my taste in this. And this, not as much up my alley, but I very much like just the design of this thing. Like, it's very fully realized Mars, like it's the cyberpunk dirty underground thing. And that started, I don't know how far back, but blew up with Blade Runner, and I think it's really, really well done here. I'm sure you guys saw some of the same very surface level notes that I saw, but Cronenberg was on this thing for a long time, writing a bunch of drafts of this thing, and I guess he's to be thanked for the contribution of almost everything to do with the mutants, and maybe a lot of the design of the monsters and the grotesque like body horror element of it. And that's, I don't love all his movies, but he does that unlike anyone I've ever seen. And a lot of them are, a lot of his movies are quite good, and the body horror is always unbelievable, and it's pretty gross here and pretty good. Like exploding balloon melty face type stuff, like where it's obviously special effects, but it just looks so grotesque that it's just really, really works. I'm trying to think, like melty balloon faces and stuff. That's what I'm thinking of. I don't know. Like it's gross. It's pretty fucked up, and that's body horror really gets to me, and it makes me uncomfortable at times. So I think it's really done well here, and so really like design and brutality are the things that I liked. I liked, the arms being ripped off in the elevator shaft. That stuff worked. There's a couple problems for me with the movie, and I think a little of it's on me. Sometimes pretty early in a movie, I'm just like, this isn't a serious movie, and I kind of tune out anything. And so I stop analyzing themes or anything like that as much as I might have been. And with an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie where I think he's pretty clearly a terrible actual actor, it's easy to tune it out when it's a big action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I wasn't taking it very seriously. I came around on it a little more afterwards thinking about it. But I don't know. I don't like, it bothers me that the approach with Philip K. Dick adaptations is 98% of the time to just go, that's an interesting idea, let's make a big dumb action movie about it. And that's kind of, I'm trying to think, like that's a writer who I've read a lot of. I think he generally has amazing ideas, and then he sets up the ideas for like 212 pages, and then in the last 20 pages he kind of doesn't know how to finish it very often. So I can get why you just want to use the idea, but I don't love that the idea is always, that's a good idea, let's just make it a big action movie. The guy who ended up with the final screenwriting credit, they said it went through like 48 drafts over 12 years or something like that. But the guy who ultimately got his vision on the screen, he said his idea was, this is Raiders of the Lost Ark goes to Mars. Well, I don't like Raiders of the Lost Ark at all. That's not my thing. And I don't like that, that action adventure is not really my thing. So it's a bummer when an idea guy's stuff just gets turned into like, I don't know, like theme park stuff. But for what it is, it's pretty decent at it, I guess. I guess the missing element, if it's not going to be like a brainy sci-fi movie, because at the end, and again, this might be on me, I'm not worried about what was real, what was a dream. I was just, it's fine, it's over. That movie's done, and I don't think it matters or I care. But I think the missing element to make it like a very good movie in spite of all that is I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny, and I don't think Arnold is funny. I don't think he's charming. It might be a generational thing or what you grew up with, but I wasn't a kid who enjoyed Arnold movies. I wasn't seeking him out. I obviously in later years don't like him as a politician and a person, but he doesn't work for me in a charming way where the one-liners are funny. If it's if this was Bruce Campbell, maybe I would have laughed at him. There's like a fine line, but I think if it was funny, this would be a really enjoyable movie. So it's kind of like a low end okay to me, which is a disappointment because it is really well liked. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think of? Before I go back, I gotta say I hate Johnny Cab. The Johnny Cab,
I thought that was funny. I don't know.
For sure in the Klan though. Johnny Cab is in the KKK.
Probably.
There's no question. What do you? And I don't know if you even think in these terms, but do you guys feel at all similar about Philip K. Dick stuff, or do you not even know what's his stuff? Like, they're never brainy sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think of that, but you're definitely right.
Like, even his Minority Report's like a really good idea, and I think people like that, but I still think that devolves into like Attack of the Clones level CGI with Tom Cruise jumping from one CGI structure to another. It's like I don't get why that's. I mean, Blade Runner doesn't do that, but I don't know that it's one of his better books, and it also doesn't get into any of the religion, which is the most interesting part. So I don't know. Mine is Scanner Darkly's the adaptation that works for me out of all of them, but I don't know. There's maybe more to explore here, or maybe it's a 3-page short story. I don't actually know.
And Scanner Darkly obviously is the least commercially successful of those. I haven't seen it, and most people have not. I think that the timeline would go, the person who had decided to adapt Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep into Blade Runner did not think, oh, this is going to be number one at the box office for a movie. They just thought, this is a fascinating story, and I can make a total, like, Ridley Scott, I guess, because I can make an atmosphere out of it. And they were surprised that it became a cult hit, like, afterwards. I don't know how well it did at the box office. So then for this movie, he writes the book, and they adapt it to become Total Recall. It would seem crazy to think that this brainy book, this sci-fi story, could be number one movie at the box office. But it was not crazy at all because they saw, well, Blade Runner caught on. This maybe could be a number one, and it was number one at the box office because of Arnold and the comedy aspect and juicing it for popcorn. Yeah. Then you go to the third one with a Minority Report. Just the track record of those previous two movies, like in the 90s, they're like that was probably late 90s Minority Report, like 98 or something. Yeah. And they look back and say, well, how can we get back some of that revenue from that type of film? Oh, Philip K. Dick also. Well, they were going to make I think Minority Report was going to be adapted to become Total Recall 2, and where the Douglas Quaid character Schwarzenegger would be like reformed law enforcement now, and so use some plot elements from Minority Report, and then I guess that didn't work out, and Steven Spielberg got some control over it and turned it into a movie of its own. But without the track record of Blade Runner and Total Recall being hits after the fact, how many there's sci-fi writers out there and people try to adapt them all the time, but they rarely do become number one box office hits. So there's some kind of formula. And why would you pick Verhoeven to do it based on what he had done previously?
Well, he had a big one, right? He was coming off RoboCop, I think.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Which I don't know again, it's hard. I don't know what kind of numbers that did, but to me, that's some big cultural touchstone, like an important movie, but I don't even know. Again, I don't know if people saw that. I'm guessing they did. But
I don't think I've seen it all the way through. That's the one Verhoeven I haven't. I think I've seen most of it in bits and pieces. Same with Schwarzenegger. I've seen all his top stuff except Predator. I count it as watch because I'm sure I've seen enough of it. But just, as a kid on HBO or something at a friend's house, I saw most of it, and I get it, but I haven't sat down and watched it. A couple of blind spots for me from these two guys.
So I mean, the most egregious, and I think you guys are going to like this, so it's like disproving my own point, but it's a bias, I think, probably in me. But so like the most egregious, terrible scene that I guess is supposed to be funny, or maybe it's supposed to be so bad it's funny, is the hologram fake out scene where he the guy kills Arnold and then he just laughs maniacally like a moron. Like, I don't, what is that actually supposed to be funny at the time? Or is it supposed to be, look at this doofus who can't act? I don't know. It was better in The Last Jedi, I must say. But I don't like. That's a terrible scene. That's terrible.
But in 1990, we didn't have holograms that looked like that. They look like R2-D2's, like Leia, Princess Leia.
Well, the idea was good, but the comedy of it, like that, like they went to it like 3 times. I just don't. I'm just not on that comedic wavelength with this thing. How did that scene play for you guys?
Silly.
Yeah, same now for sure.
Okay.
But I still get thrilled by the scene where any scene where he gets into the chair to have 2 weeks of implanted memories, like any kind of an Inception type thing, or how many movies have followed this trope that Total Recall showed them how to use, is always fascinating to me. It's like a repeatable formula that I never get tired of devouring.
So another dystopian type future film, this one German film directed by Wolf Grimm called Kamikaze 89, came out in 1982. It's the last on-screen role from Rainer Werner Fassbinder in a totalitarian society of the future in which the government controls all facets of the media. A homicide detective investigates a string of bombings and finds out more than he bargained for. So I was actually doing some digging on this, and there's really not much said out there on this film, so I don't really have anything as far as background goes. But all I can tell you is, wow, what a fucking crazy 90 or 100 minutes or whatever this thing was.
I can tell you that it was originally cast to be Richard Dreyfuss in the lead.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, could you imagine Fassbinder in Krippendorf's Tribe, though? I mean,
I haven't seen that movie, so I can't picture
me
it.
neither.
Okay.
So yeah, German film here. Not much about the director either. He didn't make a lot of well-known things. So yeah, just this crazy, surreal. I think this is hilarious. I don't know where you guys are going to be on the comedy of this thing, but the plot, it's this weird political conspiracy thing back to this funny. I don't know what you call them, but these cops aren't great guys either. But Fassbender's character running around in his leopard print suits, when he's got like a perfect case solving record. He's just got this completely amazing demeanor all the time, and just the way he reacts with just about every other character in this film. And there's 3 or 4 different characters that hit it out of the park for me in this, and I'll come back around to them. Sometimes it gets, because the plot's so convoluted and kind of just, and the way the film's laid out, it's just really hard to follow some things, because it's kind of the surreal nature of the film. And it's got these great set pieces. I think like the production design is insane. The cinematography is fantastic. This one totally is like one of those Rotten Tomato splits. I see the critics have this at 87%, and the general audiences have this just at 50%. But when you watch a film like this, you can definitely tell. Not going to be for everybody, but depends on if the comedy works for you. I think it's great. I think, some of the characters I like. Anton, I love. His Fassbender's sidekick in this film. There's I don't know who she is, but the lady from the swimming pool, that whole scene is great. I love her in this. The fat guy in the pink suit with like the colored beard that gives him that you run into a few times. Just great stuff. I mean, it's a good film to get stoned and just take it all in, man, because there is some sensory overload as they keep coming back to this laughing contest that's just totally kind of uncomfortable and annoying through this film. But yeah, just one of the perks, I guess, of this film. And I love that this detective hangs out in like a cop disco bar playing racquetball all the time. So
Alone, I imagine.
yeah, alone. So yeah, Fassbinder's great, at least here, just with this goofy character. But I love the lines he gives. I love the camera work as he's like circling a guy and the camera's circling the opposite way, and it's just all this sensory overload shit. But the thrust of it is, does the artsy part work for you, and is it funny? Because I could see it being kind of a slog if you don't find it funny. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed Kamikaze 89. We'll talk about the set pieces later, but who's next? Who agrees that this rules?
Well, I'll throw a few things in and come back to, but I think this is one of those perfect. This is a 5 out of 5 star movie in the category of movies you pause so you can take pictures of screenshots and send them to people.
Yeah.
Like I sent that picture of him playing racquetball to a lot of people the first time I saw this. Like, that's extremely funny. Because Fassbinder at this point, this is like a year before he died, and he's almost late 30s. But his presence in this movie gives me the kind of comfort and just like joy. There's not a lot of joy in the world right now, so I thought the idea of him in this, it gives me the same kind of joy as like mid to late period Orson Welles show.
I just thought of that as you were saying.
Like, because he's like Orson Welles in wow, I can't think of anything. One of my 10 favorite movies ever, as the cop. Sorry, Touch of Evil.
Yeah.
Like, just so gross and like kind of bad, but just such a funny presence in every scene. So there's like a comfort to that. Like, I just like that guy so much, and he is a good actor. He's just a weird actor in this. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, it's a real question, like, what is this? Because, I mean, unless Robert chime in if you know, I'm just going to assume no one knows, but like, what happened? Like, I don't know what happened at all. So if we start from a place that we don't know what happened, and that's kind of the standard takeaway, then I think you start asking what is this? And to me, it's kind of the same thing that Inherent Vice was. Like, it's funny and it's very convoluted, and it's not even like jokes that are funny sometimes. It's just weird, like, movements and, I don't know, shoving the frame with weird shit. Obviously a very different setting, but the same kind of idea of taking those old convoluted private investigator type movies and setting them somewhere else. And, in that movie and this one, the mystery kind of just completely fizzles out, to me anyway, and maybe doesn't matter, and it's just, did you enjoy that ride? But the difference with this one and like Inherent Vice is, I think there's genuine questions about this one of whether it's actually inept in every way. Like, is it actually just very bad? Like, Inherent Vice is a choice, and I think this is a choice, but you could argue like this is just like convoluted, stilted and bad. But you can also lodge that at a lot of the movies Fassbinder directed. This is not particularly similar to it, but some of like the disjointedness and the stiltedness can be. But I don't know, like, it's first of all, what is it, and then does it work? So I think it's not, the plot doesn't matter, and it is just if you like the weirdness of it. Because to me, it's every single, like, I mean, it's just very kooky people being weird very slowly for an hour and 40 minutes. Like, every shot features something that is way off. Somebody acting very weird, somebody talking very weird, like a sadistic laughing contest that keeps coming back, like you talked about, Eric. Like, it's like a painful laughing contest. It's like a marathon laughing contest. I think that's been going on for many days. Or it could just be a pretty serious conversation, but the guy has a rainbow goatee. Like they're not going to give you a shot where it's not weird. And so if you can enjoy the weirdness, the garish, wacky design of this, here I think we're looking at a faux utopia that's very dystopian, like even a tiny bit below the surface, like everything's actually terrible. People are just sedated by watching reality TV, which maybe that's prescient here. But they talk about like 99.8% of people are watching their show. So literally, like we get no sense of the outside world. And I would say that's a problem, except for it presents it as everyone we're not seeing is just watching people laugh for many, many days in a row. So it does seem like a really dystopian thing. So I don't know. I just like the design, the setting, the weirdness. But there's times I'm like, this is boring and probably bad, but I'm kind of into this. And there's so many questions, but like I don't know anything that's going on. I don't know who created Chrismum Papas or whatever his name, Chrismum Papas, the main villain. Is this like a person, like the bad guy who runs all media? Is this like a 1984 Goldstein thing where he creates a villain and then a hero and everyone? But people don't seem interested. They don't seem angry. There are no people. They're just watching people laugh. So I don't know what the point is. So there's just a lot of weird details that I don't know what they serve other than just to give you this really kind of creepy, funny, weird mix that I'm generally positive on, because I just like watching Fassbinder be weird, and it's even his performance is even pretty low key, and that's kind of interesting too, because he's not like going over the top at all, really. He just doesn't want anyone to talk. He's depressed as he has to eat what look like unbelievably terrible sandwiches.
Yeah.
Like he just has a stack of terrible sandwiches in his fridge, and he looks very depressed about it.
Vegetables are illegal, apparently.
That's right. So I don't know. I think this is actually a good mix with these two movies, because I think there's some similarities, and I'm curious. I actually have a hunch how Robert's going to go on this, but I'm curious how he reacts to it, because I look at the two, and one of them I find a lot of joy in, but it's really offering very little life, and then the other one's offering tons of life, and I'm getting very little joy out of. So I worry, but I kind of expect you go the other way. But what do you think, Robert?
I could definitely see why you liked it, and it definitely worked for me as well. I have it.
Nice.
I would give it the same star rating as Total Recall. I liked it just as much, because I like the weirdness and I liked the comedy, and so you talk about how weirdly directed it is. That made me look into this Wolf Grimm guy, and he only did one more film after this, something with a German title, and then almost exclusively, or really exclusively, worked in German television from this in 1982 till 2011. He died in Berlin in 2015. I think that Germans are not known for comedy, so you could be skeptical going in. It's not Bruno Dumont. Well, he's French? What is his nationality?
Yes, French.
Yeah, French can do comedy. You know, these offbeat, oddball comedies tend to work for us, maybe even more than others for Dumont and things like that. But for Germans, you don't know. It's not even like the Swedish ones we've seen from Anderson or whatever.
Right.
This is dealing with more political stuff too. With it's like this future nationalist state, all media and entertainment from one single source, and the Blue Panther, and it seems to have like a sexual undertone to everything that they air. And I think that at one point they talk about, we can't just turn off 48 channels. And I think in 1982 that seemed like an absurd number of channels, and here's what we're showing. It's just like women gyrating and being drugged and dancing to music and whatever else they're showing, but 48 channels is not that much. I do think that Chrismo Pompas is apparently that's the nemesis, but it's a dope name for an underground insurgent movement. And I like the world building here. We have this really drab world, this brutalist architecture again, but then we have this colorful, flamboyant wardrobe and like playful camera movement that's being used throughout, especially as we get to know, it introduces us to the Fassbinder or the Jansen character that he plays. But yeah, that leopard print suit is just iconic. I've seen that before. I didn't know it was from this movie. I just knew that Fassbinder had that look, but I didn't know which movie it was from. I thought he directed it just from the cover of it. But with that, also iconic with the leopard print suit is the eyeball ring. And if you notice, he had an eyeball bolo tie, like where it ties the tie together as an eyeball as well. I guess it's supposed to say like he sees everything as a detective, I guess. Just very on the nose with that. Or on the bullseye, I guess would be more appropriate. But of course, this is going to be up my alley because the noir element of this investigator, but just a very, very relaxed performance from Fassbinder. But he's playing this very serious character in this world is like a silly, scary world. I think it's very scary, and like it's a paranoid state that somehow we as the audience, I'm reading it, I'm paranoid about this world, but the people in it, like you mentioned, are not really paranoid about it. And the cop that we follow is part of the system as well. He's not really trying to bring the system down or anything, at least not overtly. And the people within the world seem to be pretty chill about it. So it's very strange. It's silly stuff going on the fringes of the story. So when he says he never laughs on duty, and he gets very serious about it, and he tells Anton to avoid unnecessary questions and refrain from unnecessary remarks, it just seems like it's filtered down to him from this fascist or totalitarian regime. When he kills a lot of people in this movie, it's pretty violent.
Yeah,
He's just murking these people left and right, and then he just calls it in. Report a premature death. It just means he murdered a man. Somebody from the rebellion he murdered. He's got this tiny notepad that's like adorable because it's like in a little metal case, but he mostly doodles in it, so it draws people's profiles or whatever. And he's this detective that appreciates art, which is an odd wrinkle you don't see in most cop stories. I definitely thought of Inherent Vice on multiple occasions watching this, given like you have a certain number of days to solve this really bizarre crime that they don't trust going to the main police for. We see these kind of shadowy things like the cop club. What's going on there? I don't really know. They've got different ways of working out stress. Really, I definitely agree with Eric on Anton. Just seemed like a great friend. And like he just wants to help. He's so eager to he's naive and eager to help Jansen solve the case, but Jansen just treats him like he's this annoying kid brother.
He's got a great tricycle, the best tricycle in film since Nashville, I would say.
I love it's. I mean, it's like 30 seconds long or whatever, but there's a scene where Fassbinder's sitting in his car, and Anton drives up on his tricycle or whatever, and Fassbinder tells him that, get out of here, you're being suspended with no pay or whatever, because, I don't know, he thought he was in on the thing or whatever, and Anton gets just disgusted by it, and the camera follows him as he backs his tricycle up and drives away, and he's staring at Fassbinder with this goofy face the entire time, and just the awkwardness of this bike backing up and shit. I just 30 seconds that was just hilarious to me. Hilarious.
I laughed out loud at that. I imagine on set Fassbinder had to have cracked up when that guy did that. There's no how many takes it take to not lose it.
Those are the screenshots for me. Anytime with Anton on his tricycle. Yeah.
That guy's great. That guy's one of the Fassbinder regulars, I would guess, 10 to 15 movies. So that guy rules for sure.
It's those little absurd moments where they lean into it, but yet that's causing a friction between the serious people in this serious story, but it's this silly world, this scary world envelops them. But there's this another one. An example is when he shoots this guy from the Crispopompas. He's jumped in a forklift and he's coming towards him with some bloody tarp thing, and he shoots the guy that's driving the forklift. But then he falls on the horn, the little beeping horn of the forklift. So it's bang, beep, beep, bang, bang. A little funny counterpoint with the sound effect. Yeah, the thumbs up police, they have this thumb symbol, and it can mean different things. So when the chief dies, he's totally not upset about the chief dying. He takes out his mirror and he gives him a thumbs up as he's wheeled off. He just died in front of him. We also have these guards for the thumbs up police they have nurses uniforms, it looks like to me, and they have hot pink cheekbones with their makeup on, and it's the weirdness, it's the twist on this noir detective story that's everything's a few degrees off of what you're expecting it to be, and it's not explaining much because he's a man of few words and more than a few vices. Drinking's illegal, he's heavily into that, and lots of other things. But I love it's set in this deteriorating future. There's a lot of computer voices and video calls for a 1982 movie, and this colorful lighting, but it's this dilapidated office buildings and these dank nightclubs and this like industrial skyline. We see them on the roof at some point with these giant smokestacks and antennas around them, and there are these garbled like radio transmissions. But it feels like just like an analog dream of a semi-digital future. So that's basically the definition of 80s of cyberpunk. Like, I don't think that, like, if this movie was released now, you wouldn't think it is cyberpunk, but in 1982 it definitely was. And it's talking about media empires and social activists with this violent means to an end, and the newspaper that's controlled by this media group as well, and they're using that. It's interesting how like I don't have the answer to what's going on here. Like you asked, Ian, what happened with these explosions and the company and who did what now and how did the investigation turn out? I really don't know. But I thought it was interesting that the MacGuffin to keep you interested, in this case, seemed to be these awards that these are printed on special paper, and they're signed by people at some famous people in Germany signed it, and everyone and it was used as part of the ransom note or the bomb threat. And so he's going around to people that won this specific award printed on the specific paper from the specific paper mill or newspaper printing factory. And that's just, I think it's a cool award. Usually if you make a movie where an award is the MacGuffin, it'll be some trophy or some plaque, but this is like a giant card. And like, I think that is a good award. Like more like the Oscars should give out a giant card that people sign and you keep it in your house, and you would like love that instead of a little trophy. I don't know.
It had gold dust in it too, so it was dusted in gold. It was a quality card. I'm
bringing it up so Eric takes into consideration for fantasy, one of our fantasy leagues in the future. Yeah. Dusted card would be great, I think, for the winner.
Yeah, duly noted.
Futuristic. Let's see. The other two things I wanted to mention were the score. Well, the lighting and the score reminded me of Michael Mann's Manhunter. The founder of Tangerine Dream, the band, did the score on this, and so I think that's the connection I'm making. And then you said that this came out like a year before Fassbinder died. Do we know if the final shot is so like enigmatic? Was he known to be dead when this movie was released? Like,
I think it actually might be the case. I think it might not have released for the most part until the year after he died. I'm not sure, but I actually think it might have taken a couple of years to come out. So you might be onto something there.
That makes sense to me because Fassbinder looks into the camera. Well, he tri-humps a Neil Armstrong wallpaper.
Yeah, what's that about? For a really long time.
Well, and they're playing the moon landing, American recording or coverage of the moon landing, or Richard Nixon talking to the astronauts is what they're playing. And he's humping the astronaut on the wall. I don't know what's going on, but then he turns and looks into the camera, and in that moment it struck me as very what's his name from Iran, the guy that died, that filmmaker Kiarostami, like at the end of Taste of Cherry, how he kind of breaks the fourth wall. Here you see Fassbinder look into the camera, and I took it as right there he's transitioning from character to actor to himself, meaning he's in it ends up being in slow motion towards the end of the scene, but it's in real time when he like humps the wall and then turns around, and he's Jansen, and then before your eyes in 2 seconds he's Fassbinder, and then 2 seconds later he's Werner, and you realize, oh, he passed away shortly after this. That was kind of fascinating to me, the way that shot was chosen, the way it was performed, and his character is very like exacerbated to seem like, because at the end of this investigation he's kind of worn out, but then it's winking at the camera and the audience. We watch this, and I don't know. We're supposed to be smarter and pick up on something right here, but then he's kind of like chuckling with us or at us while he's like smoking and looking towards the camera and bleeding from a gunshot wound to his hand in this iconic leopard print suit. Just a really stunning final shot that really kind of left me floored.
It's probably partly just the ambiance of the film, but then I guess when you look at pictures of him, it makes sense. But he looks way old. He would have been about 34 when he made this, and wow. He looks every second of that. And before I forget, 5-star smoking in this movie. 5-star smoking, constantly. Yep.
Like, I feel like he was smoking during action scenes.
Yeah, he was.
like chasing people.
He had one at all times, and when it would go out, he'd grab another one.
I was a big fan of the small moment where they find out there's a bomb that's going to go off in like 9 minutes or something like that, and it's two out of shape, slightly overweight guys at the bottom of 30 floors deciding who's going to run up.
Okay, you do it.
Yep.
I'll take the helicopter.
Quality. I thought the main villain.
But it was like I don't understand how, because one person, it looks like Fassbinder still goes to the top of the stairs even though he told Anton to go up, and then they like cut to somebody going to the room like, oh, if Fassbinder was in that room earlier, he just didn't look behind the computer servers and there's another door he could have just seen. So like all he has to do now is just step 10 feet further and solve the mystery, but they just cut to him like in his living room, and that's the end. See what they did at the 31st floor. It's still this enigma.
I really don't know what happened. I think the main bad guy, or the guy who runs everything, had at least 20% Palpatine to him. He reminded me of freaked me out in that way. Terrible person. His right-hand man, really fucking weird. Cheryl walked into the room for a few minutes and just said, "These guys are scary," and left. When that guy was sitting at the desk and he kept, either something was ringing or he kept making that like weird high-pitched laugh sound.
Yeah.
4 or 5 times. I don't know.
Said, oh, baby! Like in English, and he was he pushing a button that would put laughing gas on the competition or something?
I don't know. That felt like I was watching the '60s Batman or something. I don't know what that guy was up to, or maybe like what I think the Fifth Element is like, which I've only seen pieces of.
Yeah, I thought of Fifth Element as well.
These guys that guy's out there, but yeah, Fassbinder humping. I don't have an answer. And I really don't know what happened. I actually don't know how this ended. I don't know who set the bombs. Was it Rainbow Guy? Was it, like, were they, like, there's a whole plot thread of the terrorists are just artists who got their work altered with? So is this about pissy artists? Like, it's not actually about, like, changing the world for a better way. It's just, like, a pissy artist got their work altered, so they want to tear it all down. Is that a comment on something, or is that just like another throwaway? I don't even know.
You got me.
That is what that guy's thing was, though. He's like a writer, and then they changed his story, so he freaked out.
That's what he said. Yeah.
It reminded me of that musician Dr. John, because his beard was gold, green, and purple, which is like the New Orleans colors, and Dr. John's New Orleans, and like he had a goatee, and I just couldn't focus on what he was talking about. I just knew he was like Dr. John leading a rebellion, or at least he was like the ghostwriter of it. I felt like the guy that they ran off the road in the car seemed like a guy that would plant bombs. So maybe like some of the people in the rebellion were planting bombs, but the public or the corporation would attribute it to the guy that wrote the letters, which are not the same person. Maybe.
Worst gunfight ever in that like parking garage or whatever, when they're chasing the dudes in the like lingerie or whatever, in the masks, the gimp kind of guys.
Forgot about that entirely.
Great, terrible. I mean, they're point blank range. Nobody's hitting each other. Good stuff.
I do, God, I don't know if it's a bad comment, if it's a comment or not, but I do kind of like how straight edge Fassbinder is with everyone, and then he just murders everyone.
Yeah.
Like, he was like very like, that woman said suicide, and he just gave her the death glare after she said suicide. Then she changed it to premature death. He was like, it's good you said that or something, and then he's just blowing people away like left and right after that.
And drinking like crazy while bitching at people for having lettuce. So
cool guy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. I did not know how this was going to go, because it's not like I can't defend this one if someone doesn't like it. So because I'm not over the moon for it. I just think it works or doesn't. So we can fully recommend this to everyone in the world. Everyone should watch this.
Yes.
Family members, parents.
Watch it at Christmas with the whole family. Tubi TV, free TV service. You got to sit through some commercials, but that's where you can get it for free. I watched it there, and it's all there and looks good. So Yeah, if you're interested, and I think most of the people that might listen to this show would probably get a kick out of this film if you give it some time. I guess let's just kick it over right now for some what you drinking here. So, Robert, house sitting, what's in the liquor cabinet over there?
I found a couple things. I decided to go for beer and whiskey. The whiskey says the Pogues, Irish whiskey of the legendary band. So I guess that means the Pogues is a band that I'm not aware of. Maybe an Irish band. I'm not sure. Black bottle, good Irish whiskey, and then a hazy IPA from Full Sail in Oregon, Hood River Hazy IPA, Hood River, Oregon. It's not excellent, but it's quite good if you like hazy IPA.
All right. Well, I have wine here for the first time in a while. I picked up a bottle of the Naked Grape. This is their red wine blend. So it's a mix of a couple of reds, apparently. About $7, so pretty cheap find and not too bad. So, Minister, what you drinking?
Yeah, I have a beer from one of the better breweries here in Denver called Denver Brewing Company, Denver Beer Company, and it is Campfire in a Can is what it says. So it is a graham cracker porter. I don't find that I love porters all that often, so it's good as long as I'm partly distracted or it's like 8 degrees. So I think it's good while doing the show. If you drink a porter out of a can, for me sometimes it's too much, but it's in the glass. There's kind of a sad story about it. The day I bought these, the head brewer of Denver Brewing Company fell off of a mountain and died. So I don't know what's happening with this place.
Weird.
But he's like, it's a pretty big one. Like, it's right downtown. It's packed all the time, and it's got great beer. But I don't know, like, what happens when the head brewer of a brewery dies. I don't know if it, like, just gets another one, if all the beers change. But I imagine they're sticking with this one, Graham. Yeah, this is, I don't know. It's rated high. I just don't know. Are you guys porter guys?
Not typically, but I like, my favorite cereal is Golden Grahams, so I'm curious about a graham cracker flavored beer.
I was wondering, do they still have that, Robert? I went looking for that the other day, Golden Grahams, oddly enough, and I could not even find it in my local grocery store. So,
oh yeah, you got to write a letter. They should definitely have it in stock. If it's not there,
interesting. Okay,
what are they up to?
I used to love that one, S'mores, when it was like the Golden Grahams people made it, and it just they threw in some marshmallows and put some chocolate on it, and it was. Oh, yeah, that was a good one. But Golden Grahams, yeah, thumbs up. Does that have a graham cracker taste to it, Minister?
I mean, to a degree, it's not overwhelming, but a good beer is never going to be like one overwhelming flavor like that.
Sure, but
there are it's in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've had like a chocolate type beer before that was considered amazing, and I couldn't even swallow it. It was so not my thing. So this isn't that. It's a little more subtle, but there's like a flatness to a porter that I don't usually like, because I like those like hazy IPAs and stuff. But there's a little bit of that. Yeah, there's a little. It says to pair with a s'more and a tent. So I guess, it's decent. You'd probably like it.
The 1964 entry from Stanley Kubrick, this one called Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This one starring Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, and Sterling Hayden. An insane general triggers a path to nuclear holocaust that a war room full of politicians and generals frantically tries to stop. All right, so yeah, we're doing another Kubrick here within kind of eyeball distance of our last one. Definitely wanted to talk about Strangelove here at some point. It's probably my favorite Kubrick film overall. Or at least it's up there. We had some openings here, so we just got on it, and we're talking about it tonight. So, Robert, this is the first time watch for you, right?
No, it's the second time I've seen
okay.
it. I probably caught it maybe 10 or 12 years ago. And I guess I had it rated like 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, but then when I was reviewing the stats back today, like on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, I had it rated at 5 stars or 10 stars on IMDb. So I figured this one might go up on second watching, even though Kubrick's, like, as we talked about on the A Clockwork Orange episode, he's probably the greatest director in my opinion, and so he's always got the potential to put a 5-star film out there. And this one, it did bump up on second watch, so I'll go ahead and spoil it there. Second watch was clutch for this one, but it's been a long time, and there's new things to appreciate about it.
All right, and Minister, you're pretty well familiar with it at this point, right?
Yeah, a lot of times it's been in that top 100 since whenever that began, and it's moved around a little, but it's 5 and it stays 5 stars.
Nice. So yeah, this is the first one I've seen of his, almost certainly, and the one I've seen the most, no doubt. So my uncle, my father's brother, huge Peter Sellers fan. Basically, the two films he talked about all the time when I was a kid was this and Being There, the Hal Ashby directed one that we talked about a couple of years ago on the show. So I'd seen it a lot. It's an interesting progression over my life as I've watched this film, because obviously as a kid, you don't really see any of the humor at all. Honestly, I don't think it was probably within the last 10 to 15 years that I even realized Sellers was the president in this film, because that's the one where
I don't think I got that the first time around either.
Yeah, it's not terribly recognizable in that role, but when you know it, you know it. But yeah, there's a lot of things about this that made it seem much more serious when I was a kid. But yeah, this one, considered a black comedy. It's pretty funny when you look at it. Kubrick not really known for comedy and stuff, so this is a little bit different for him. This was off the heels of Lolita, so when he submitted the script here, the studio basically insisted that he get Peter Sellers in it and get him to play. They specifically said 4 roles in this one, because the way Lolita turned out, for whatever reason, they told him to make this, he needed Sellers in 4 roles. We know of 3 for sure in this film. He was also supposed to play the Slim Pickens role here, the crazy jet pilot. Apparently he had torn his ankle to some degree, so he could not maneuver around in the cockpit, so they had to, at the last minute, go find somebody for that role. They brought Pickens in, who was basically a TV character actor at the time, gave him a script with just the jet stuff in it, and told him it was a serious film. So he basically acted in this assuming it was completely serious. I don't know. Yeah, I guess his last scene would make me wonder how serious it was. But yeah, so big fan, as I said before. I just love how this thing is crafted. George C. Scott is just fantastic in this to me, at least what they ended up coming up with, because Scott was kind of tricked into hamming it up for this. He did not think the takes that he hammed it up in were going to get into the film. Kubrick apparently said, let's do some practice takes for everything where you ham it up. I don't know how you even talk a guy into that, but he ended up, of course, using the hammed up takes. George C. Scott was pissed about it and said he would never work with Kubrick again, but apparently they were playing chess constantly during the filming of this, both big chess guys, and Kubrick typically winning, so getting his way when him and George C. Scott did not agree. But I love Scott in this film. I typically like George C. Scott anyway, but I love him in this film. I think the whole buck over testosterone general thing is pretty perfect for him. I think he plays it wonderfully. Yeah, all the war room stuff is great. All the what's Mangrove? Why Mangrove is in my head now. So what's
Mandrake?
Mandrake. Yeah, the Mandrake stuff is great. President's probably my least favorite of the Sellers' work here, but Dr. Strangelove himself, not a lot of screen time, but pretty well done. Just all around really good. Seeing it this most recent time, I guess I found the plane stuff to be the actual plane itself seemed a little kind of silly. Do you guys think he meant it to look silly, or at the time that probably looked convincing, do you think?
Are you talking about the opening scene with the fueling?
Well, that's actually one of the better ones. I mean,
from the outside shots?
Yeah, the outside shots later in the film look
yeah.
really silly. Okay.
Which is pretty funny, thinking of him making 2001 like right after this. And
sure, yeah,
visually amazing thing ever, and then this one just looking kind of.
Yeah, okay. I should have thought of that. I didn't put that in.
But only because that's like the exterior shot. Everything else, it's really just jumping in between the interior shot of the war room, interior shot of the crazy General Ripper's office, and the inside of the airplane. So I think it stands out because it's like, yeah, he sent like a crew to go fly around like the Arctic Circle or something for a while and go get that footage. But it's like so separate from the rest, because I love the way this film looks otherwise, like the interior shots.
Oh yeah, great.
It's beautiful.
And I think that actually the credit sequence when they're doing the fueling thing, that was really convincing to me. So yeah, it's funny that it kind of gets silly later on, but just a fantastic film all around. We were talking a little bit off air, but apparently the original ending had everybody in the war room break out in a pie fight, which seems even the way this film is now, that seems way out there. But kind of sorry it didn't happen. But yeah, thoughts for you, Minister? It's been way up there for you all these years. So, do you find it really funny?
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to think how much I laughed. I've seen it a lot. Not that this, it's not like depending on surprise laughs a whole lot. I think it's weird. So I think it's funny for sure. Pretty much I think it's funny throughout, and I think its jokes and gags hit at a really, really high rate. Like there's very few misses. It's not like joke after joke. There's not like thousands of them, but pretty much everything is funny. There's a couple that I think are a little labored, but they even the labored ones kind of work. Like there's a guy, and you guys will like this probably, but the scene, how do I explain it? With Mandrake after Ripper's gone, and he's with like the guy, the
Bad
army
guano.
guy. And the guy says like, you're gonna have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
That might be the funniest part of the whole.
Okay.
I think that's like the funniest bit. Yeah.
Okay. So that's like a weak joke to me in the movie. Like I kind of think maybe the first time I thought that was really funny. The delivery's good. So do I think it's the funniest movie ever? I don't know, but is it as good as the funniest comedies? Like, is it as good of a movie as the best comedies? Yes. So I guess I don't know where that it's not the most I've ever laughed, but it's consistently funny and as good as any other comedy. Now, like The Long Goodbye is I like that more, and it's kind of a comedy, but this is more blatantly. So I do have I got my three hot takes I gotta throw out there just because they'll be against the grain. But again, this is a movie that we all love, so even a hot take within this is not gonna. There's only one that I could draw ire for, but the hot takes would be that the best Peter Sellers character is the president. You guys don't agree with that. I know that.
No, agree.
Okay. Sounds
He
about
kills
right.
us. The one-sided conversation on the phone. He is so good at that.
I think that's okay. So there we go. Yeah, maybe as good as any comic scene in any movie ever is the one-sided scene where, and that's why he's the best, with Peter Sellers calling President
Dmitri,
Dmitri Kissoff explaining the boo-boo to drunken Dmitri. It's like he has to explain that Ripper went a little funny in the head and did a silly thing, and he's explaining it like he's talking to a 5-year-old child. And then they get into kind of like this, like you're a teenager on the phone with your girlfriend and you're ending like, I love you. No, I love you more. No, I love you more type of thing, except for it's with how sad and upset they are that the world's going to end. Like it's this very childlike, ridiculous, one-sided thing. And then you get these reaction shots of George C. Scott, like paranoid and like chewing his lip and just like at what's going on because he's so opposed to sharing this information with the Soviets and all this stuff. So I think that scene is amazing. And so I think it's the best scene in the movie without question. So yeah, that's why I'm highest on that character. That's my one hot take. My second hot take, this is one that I thought could draw ire, but maybe not. I'm pretty mixed on Slim Pickens. I could do without that guy. And so that's like the image of the whole movie is that thing. I don't like that guy. He's not funny. He's okay. I don't mind him, or I do mind. I don't hate it, but I don't really get much out of him. He's not funny. Those scenes in the plane do work. I think everything works. But it is interesting to me if you take away just like procedural things within the plane, the movie's like 70 minutes long. Which is a surprise when you think of Kubrick's best movies because they get so big and almost bloated. And this is just a really tight one. His early movies are just really tight, which is surprising when you come to him through some of his other ones. And
like the score is 90% existent during the plane stuff. So that stuff is so much different than everything else.
Yeah.
It's inherently funny, I think, to me because Slim Pickens is so goofy. But otherwise, it seems like a very play that off as all serious stuff, sort of, if it was outside of the context of this film. The 10 to 15 minute scene near the end, before he rides the missile out, right? So they're doing all that procedural stuff coming in to drop the payload or whatever. Mm-hmm. And James Earl Jones, young James Earl Jones there, which adds to it. But it's funny that Sellers was supposed to play that role and how important that role kind of is in the context of the film. And I don't know, Slim Pickens just worked for me, I guess. But
I think he works for almost everyone. I think, and that's the image of the movie that's like the cover image is riding the bomb. But
I think that scene does work because of James Earl Jones. It's like playing it super serious, and that that crew is not just a bunch of like buffoons. Like first we meet them and they're like chewing food and not really paying attention to their gauges and stuff, and then they snap into like work mode. But like this hotshot kind of sky jockey character of his name's TJ King Kong, and he's kind of like wild. He's this wild character, but then James Earl Jones and the rest of them are playing it super serious, so it gives them like credibility as like this kind of feels real that this could be relying on this crew to do what they're supposed to do or not do what they think they're supposed to do. But it made me think: is that Pickens' character like the prelude to the space cowboy? Like if Han Solo is known as like the space cowboy kind of character, right? And then like Nathan Fillion in Serenity and in Firefly, and then you have Guardians of the Galaxy with Chris Pratt's character. Like what's the origin of that? Could it be traced back to before there was space cowboys? Before Steve Miller's The Joker, Space Cowboys, was there like a sky cowboy? And that's this character. I don't know if there was a sky cowboy in a movie before this. So that would have been Sellers. That really was the prelude to Han Solo.
I would have welcomed it, but he's all right. there's some real distinct voices in that plane. That's in this movie too. But I mean, James Earl Jones, it's Pickens, no one sounds like him, and then the guy on the radio's got like such a way over the top radio voice as he's directing or telling them what to do and where they're at and stuff. And then moving on to another distinct voice. This was my third hot take. It's the least hot, but I could get some pushback. I think that Sterling Hayden as Ripper is by far the best character and funniest character in the movie.
Yeah. I'm with you there.
He's so great, and I love that guy at this point as an actor.
Chewing on a cigar the whole time.
The entire time. Yeah, he's Air Force whatever, running the Air Force base. He's the guy who sends them on their way, sends the bombs, shuts down the Air Force base, cuts off all communication. He's playing he's got this deep voice. He's 6'5" with the cigar. He's like a true believer, super patriot conspiracy theorist. He goes a little crazy in the head, but I don't think he does. I mean, this is his belief. So I mean, that's the whole point of the movie, is how a couple wackos, or not even wackos, just you buy into this bullshit and you think this is what patriots do and this can all go wrong. That's the horror in the black comedy. But the comedy's coming.
He does not seem like someone that would go like rogue, psychotic. Like he seems like he would just fall straight in line with the command, with the military, and just go with it and give the orders. But to go rogue, that's more scary. That you look at this guy and like, when you can't see that he's clearly crazy, only his most recent actions are so off the board that it just boggles your mind. You're like, am I crazy? What is up with this guy?
And he rose through to that level. And the comedy comes from, a lot of what he says is funny, but it's mostly the way he delivers it. Just this deadpan steamroller type dialogue where he's with Mandrake, who is some British agent. I don't know. He's like a British military person,
British
right?
Air Force, yeah.
Right, and he's like his number two, and he's like more like neurotic and like scared and talking quickly, and Hayden is just like this alpha male, calm and assured steamroller. Like he doesn't listen to a damn thing the guy says, and he just, this is what I'm gonna do, but it's completely calm. Like I'm just gonna blow up and kill, 100 million Russians or whatever. Because of I got to keep my fluids clean, or what is it? The fluoride. Yeah, the fluoride conspiracy. Right, and just if you listen, like if you just look at the dialogue, he's crazy, but the way he delivers it, he doesn't come across crazy. So I just think there's a ton of comedy in that character and the way he goes out and all that stuff, and that actor is awesome, and he's at his best. With Kubrick, really, with this and The Killing, and then of course the one I just said, my favorite movie, The Long Goodbye. So just a ton of comedy, but not like I'm not laughing out loud a lot at him, but he is really funny, and Sellers gets a lot of credit for being there for him to play off, for sure. But I think he's maybe the funniest.
He's the cop that Tony gets shot in The Godfather. I was like, where have I seen him play a cop before? He's the one that gets shot in the restaurant by Corleone.
He doesn't have a ton of huge roles in movies, but he's got like 4 really memorable ones in really great movies, and that's great. It's more than most careers, for sure. So I think it's just as good of a satire as I can think of. It's a really, really stupid era of American politics that I think endlessly morphs into more stupid eras. That paranoia, the boner for war, kind of that absurd, dangerous patriotism that really is never lessened. We're still there. We just morph, and maybe it's now with Russia again, but of course it's with China and stuff. There's the last, or very close to the last line of the movie, had me kind of go down a different rabbit hole that probably should have been apparent the whole time, but they come up. Dr. Strangelove is a former Nazi, I guess, like high-ranking scientist, and then he comes over to America, as we know many did, and now he's building weapons and designing things for the U.S. government, and he has this idea of essentially creating a master race within missile silos, I believe, and they're going to come out after like 100 years, after all the nuclear fallout is over. And so, I mean, he's basically pulling his Nazi bullshit again. Of course, the whole idea. But it made me think of the current day, the world ending, and the biggest worry is about the Soviet edge, right? Because we have the character by George C. Scott saying, we cannot allow a mine shaft gap. Like the idea that after 100 years, when they come out of the mine shaft, the Soviets have a plan to come out slightly before them and be ahead of them or something. Some like very paranoid worry about something that's not relevant. But this is the way we think now, I think. This reminded me of like our recent election in America with Democrats and Republicans. You can pick which side is which in this. I don't know that one fits one country better, but the idea, like, we're just in this situation right now in the real world where like the world is burning, people are starving, people are being beaten on the streets, but it's all about like a political edge over your enemy that you're worried about. The Nazi scientist here kind of fits like this election where the Democratic Party invited all the architects of the Iraq war into their side. Like, they're terrible. They led us to war. We killed millions or thousands of people in Iraq. They lied to the American people. They were all with George Bush. And now the Democrats, after that, welcome them to our side to help strategize. It's just this weird. It's kind of, that was kind of what I was thinking about that Strangelove character. And I just think this paranoia and this game, the way we treat everything as a game, is here now. Still, it hasn't gone away in any way. It's a big, dangerous game with a lot of wackos, with a lot of power, and it's just like this cycle we just keep spinning through. So it's, I think it's relevant as hell, on top of being funny. So the satire works for its time, for all time. The comedy doesn't date itself. George C. Scott making really funny faces and just his physical comedy isn't going to stop being funny because of when it came out. I actually think, man, I haven't watched this in a while, that performance, I see actors I don't particularly like that I feel like might have made a whole career ripping off this performance. Because I'm not really one to go for the dumbass, like macho Texas gym teacher thing, which is what he's doing. But I see guys, and you guys may like them, and so I don't particularly. And I haven't seen a lot, so maybe they're great. But guys like Rob Riggle and Dave Koechner, like, I don't like their whole careers that I've seen. Feel like they're just trying to do this type of thing, and it never plays for me. So it's interesting how good George C. Scott is in this and how well it works. So yeah, I think this thing is awesome. So, and Robert does too. But what do you think of it?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you guys are saying. I think I did laugh out loud more this time. I think the first time around, I was still processing what it was actually saying and getting most of the like surface level jokes. Like, there's kind of a broad like Mel Brooks kind of humor going on, but then there's also more like, I don't know, like insightful or kind of just sharper or more like heady type of humor mixed in there as well, just with the situation going on and like this being made shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and like they wrote it to be dramatic, but then it just kept being funny to them, because if you try to make this stuff up to like try to get from point A to point B with this crazy nuclear system, this apparatus that can kill us all because of man's hubris to have that power to end it all for all of us, it's absurd. And so when they try to make a narrative about that, it just kept becoming funny to them. So they decided to actually lean into the comedy of it. And so, since I had seen it that one time, that was enough for me to laugh at all the same stuff from the first time, but then appreciate more of it beyond that. I think the first time I watched it, it was that Slim Pickens that stood out to me. He's just so singular, like you guys mentioned, and I had never heard of or seen him before. But this time, it was George C. Scott, as you guys are both praising, just dominating those scenes. And I like that establishing scene, the only one we get with a female character, the only one that's not in the three main locations, and it's just shot like in a single take, mostly on a mirror while he's taking a shit in the other room, and his lover / secretary is trying to play diplomat on the phone for him. It's such a great like introduction to that character, and then to see how him shift when it's time for him to speak to the president, and how like, because it's an over the top performance, but he has to be contained in this war room for the duration and contained in a dialogue with the president trying to convince him. And so you have this like personality that wants to spill over and boil over, but he has to be contained because of the purpose of the situation, the room, and the conversation that he's in. And I didn't really know George C. Scott. I had known that he stars in Patton, but that doesn't seem like a movie I would like just about a war general that's just super powerful and a great plotter of wars. But I'm sure it's great. It's a great performance, I'm sure. But I recently saw him, I guess the first Peter Sellers movie I've seen is what is it, Firestarter or whatever, with Drew Barrymore, the Stephen King movie. Yeah, Firestarter. And then this, I'd seen previously, and I guess he's in Angus from 1995, if you remember that one about that kid. But that's all the George C. Scott I've seen. I've been kind of like anxious or trepidatious about like getting into his stuff, but he's so good in everything I've seen him, and he really like leans into his roles. And I have a similar kind of blind spot in general with Peter Sellers. I've only seen 2 films of Peter Sellers, if you can believe it. The ones Be in There, yeah, the one we reviewed and I loved, and seeing him in this a couple of times. But I like
none of the Pink Panther stuff.
I've never seen any of the Pink Panther stuff. I've seen like a little bit of it when they played on Comedy Central. I think they maybe could watch for 10 or 20 minutes, but kind of get bored by it, or he wasn't in the scene. It's kind of weird. So, but I totally suspect that he might be like my favorite actor if I take the plunge and watch all his stuff. Like I appreciate him that much in the 2 films I've seen from him, and I've heard him quoted as saying like he thought he didn't have any identity outside of the characters he plays. Like he's just such a vessel for like an actor, like just getting into roles, and then just being this kind of vanilla guy, I guess, away from it. And he apparently died kind of young, like in his 50s, of like alcoholism, and was kind of depressed and stuff. So I don't know. Somebody interesting I want to study more and get to know his work a lot more. I think, a lot of people consider him one of the best ever, but I just haven't taken the plunge. But I think that could pay dividends just for me having another favorite actor. But yeah, so I think if I watched it again, even though I appreciate the different physicality he does in all his different roles, I think the third time it might be Sterling Hayden that becomes to the top, that kind of steals the show. So yeah, I totally agree with those hot takes. I guess I had a couple here. I think Red Phone is a better title than Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Like, I guess what Kubrick settled on is like maybe a more artistic title, but the book that it's adapted from is just called Red Phone, and this movie has a lot of red phone type of conversations going on in it. That's kind of the central thing of it. I just think that's a great title. So that's kind of a hot take, I guess. I kept wondering, what does Plan R stand for? Like in a Kubrick movie, everything means something. So what does Plan R? Like, what's the R for? Is that R for Russian or retaliation they keep talking about, or Red Alert, the name of the book? But I don't know. Knowing Kubrick, it's probably like the first name of one of his kids or some reference to somebody he works with, or who knows. And then both times I've seen it, I keep wondering, who's the title, like who's the first person speaker in the title? How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. Is that George C. Scott like embracing the bomb, or is that the president's kind of point of view, or is it Slim Pickens riding the bomb down to the earth and dying like no human has ever died before? Is it Sterling Hayden that's pulling the wool over, like making this decision for the whole planet and kind of leading to the doomsday device going off? Is he the one of the title saying stop worrying and just embrace the power of the bomb?
Well,
I guess more likely it's Dr. Strange.
Okay, well, I was actually thinking, just watching it yesterday and thinking about that, I was thinking it was like the Russian guy that's in the war room who gets all excited about the 10 women to each guy thing.
Is he the one taking pictures?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diplomat, yeah. Or
He'll
the
see the big
yeah.
board. Yeah, he got really excited about the 10 women, so I was thinking, maybe that's the guy that loves the bomb.
Yeah, and that totally goes with what I'm like the name. who's speaking, who loves the bomb, is strange love. Like extrapolate that. The strange love is like the symbol of man's like sick love for absolute power. And even at the end, yeah, one man for 10 women for one man. That's man's sick love for absolute power, and it's just sick. And so that's what Kubrick was attracted to in the story. So I guess that's why, because there isn't. So from what I've read, there is no Dr. Strangelove character in the book. So that's all added. Well, they work together. The author and Kubrick work together on it, but that's really interesting.
Well, and the book's not a comedy either, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not. It's more of a disaster film, I guess, or disaster story.
Well, what's interesting too is this. We may have talked about this in some regard, but that movie Fail Safe came out the same year that this came out with Jimmy Stewart, which was basically the same thing, only not a comedy, where they think somebody accidentally launched nuclear missiles at Russia or the other way around or something, and they're trying to deal with it. But I haven't seen that in a while, but a much more serious film than this is. And
that one's
same year. Really.
Yeah, that one's Fonda. It's not.
Not Stewart.
It's,
Fonda, right.
It's the Lumet one. I did it. Man, we've been doing this show a long time, but I did that on the show many years ago. It's pretty great. It's Fonda and Matthau, and it came out after this one only because Kubrick sued to keep it from coming out before, and then had his own company, and had the same production company and distribution company actually ultimately buy it and release it later. But it's great. It's interesting because like Robert was talking about, like this one, Kubrick was writing it and then it just became absurd because it had to, because the material, when you try to write it seriously, just became absurd. So then it's funny that you could actually play it straight and it still works. So that's a great movie. It's a great night. You can watch both of them in like 3 hours or whatever. But that's good. And yeah, that's Lumet. So another master.
And I think the way, like something you talked about earlier, is the pacing, like how, like this is a 90-some minute movie, but it's tight and it's like the efficient pacing, but without feeling hurried. Because for comedy, it's really important to be kind of quick, but not hurried. You can't hurry the punchline. You have to let that time, let it breathe. And the editing here, like that's what I noticed the second time so much, how maybe not rhythmic, but there's beats to this. There's the edits, the dialogue, the sound design, the camera angles, even like how the characters are introduced, the line delivery. Like I can see the dozens and dozens of takes that he uses because he's kind of like conducting a symphony orchestra with how it's going to be edited later. Like, yeah, and he's kind of like the greatest composer of all time. Like this movie, like it kind of sings the way it kind of, the editing of it. And I can tell it's edited for comedy. So, and that's really good for rewatch. I think I could see myself watching this dozens of times. There's too big of a gap between my first and second watch for sure. A new number 5 for me, which 3 for one director. Yeah. I mean, and he has a bunch of other 4.5 and 4-star films with me. So,
well, what were the 3 again?
Shining in 2001, and now this one.
Okay, and Clockwork Orange was really close.
Clockwork Orange, yeah, is like a 4.89, and then Paths of Glory is a 4.5.
Because that's, I was trying to think about it, off the top of my head, and personally, I have a hard time finding a better 3-film run than Strangelove 2001 and A Clockwork Orange. They're all 5s for me. They're all top. I mean, 2 of them are top 30 at least, and the only thing I could think that was even comparable would be a couple of the Coppola ones, but you have The Conversation in there, and that's not as high for me. But you could put The Conversation between the 2 Godfather movies, that's unbelievable. Or you could put The Conversation, Godfather 2, and Apocalypse Now, that's unbelievable. But I don't know that beats this, so that's quite a fucking run. And the other thing, and I mean, we did a Kubrick a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, like we had brought up earlier. So I'm sure I brought it up plenty, but I just think Kubrick deserves a lot of credit for the crazy performances he gets out of people, just like the weird and like unhinged at times and just off the wall at times. It's really the difference between some of these movies being good, because this is great dialogue, and being really great. Like, I think Clockwork Orange was aided by some really fucking weird performances. This one's really aided by, obviously, Sellers going all out doing Sellers. Like, not everyone's gonna let a guy go that weird, but of course, like I think it was Eric was saying, they kind of forced George Scott to go off the wall. Normally he just brings people in and lets them go off the wall. He kind of forced one there, and I don't know where that started, but all his best films have really out there performances. Obviously Nicholson in The Shining, and I think it started in The Killing with Timothy Carey just being fucking weird in a movie that's really not weird. It's a great movie, but you have these little flourishes of really weird performances that make these movies stick in your mind. You're always going to remember them. So, man, he does everything really great. And then that's just another great thing about him is his way with actors, which is so funny because he's known as the guy who was terrible with actors and gave them nothing. But that seems to have been a good strategy.
And what he did with Scatman Carruthers in Shining is along that same lineage, which that role was supposed to be played by Slim Pickens, but Slim Pickens said, "I'll only do it if you can promise me we'll never go over 100 takes." And hit the road, we'll replace you.
Wow.
Funny. All right, yeah. So anyway, 186. Thanks, everybody. You can follow me on Twitter, Hazer, HAZER75. Follow at Flicksation on Twitter as well. Minister, thanks for joining us as always.
You know, this show will no longer exist if Giannis leaves the Bucks. So I hope everyone's cheering for that because we're canceling the show if he leaves. Or we're recording every night because I don't have to watch Bucks anymore.
What if you guys traded to the Brewers?
He can hit about as good as anybody else on the Brewers, I would say, after last year.
A long stretch at first base.
Yeah. Robert, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, I've been getting back into actually watching films after, it's going to be a down year, a down number of films watched in 2020 for sure. But I'm glad we're getting a few trickling out towards the end here, and I'm getting some more free time of opening up to watch some movies. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter or Letterboxd or wherever you want at Robert Gassaway.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. For Robert, Ian, and myself, this is Eric saying we will catch you on the flick side.